Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of In the Kitchen with Baker Girl. Thank you, Jesus. It is another beautiful day to be in the kitchen. And in today's recipe, I would like to invite you to come into the kitchen and cook a traditional soul food meal with me. It is healthy, it is made from scratch, and it is very yummy. I am going to be cooking creamy lemon chicken, butter peas, steamed cabbage, mashed potatoes, and of course, candied orange sweet potatoes. Now, in part one, we're going to start with the creamy lemony chicken. So I'm starting off with some carrots, some onions, and some celery, or actually one onion. I did use a very large onion. I want this stock that's going to come off of the chicken. So while the chicken is braising, I'm also doing double duty and I'm making a stock as well. So you want everything to be really rich and really flavorful. For that, you need to use quite a few veggies. So I've got some carrots, a large stalk of celery. I have a large onion that I'm going to quarter. There's no need to dice the onion because once the chicken finished braising in the stock, you want to be able to remove the vegetable pieces out. So that's why you don't want to mince or dice them. I'm also going to add 2 cloves of garlic. I'm going to leave those whole. I will smash them, but I'll leave them whole. That way there's no, you don't have all those small pieces in your chicken stock. Now for the chicken itself, I'm using chicken thighs, and these are boneless, skinless, although not fatless, and I'm trimming away all of the excess fat. You can use bone-in chicken, you can use chicken breast, but I like chicken thighs for this recipe. Thighs are a little richer and they don't dry out because this is a braising. The first step is braising. So chicken breast can dry out a little. So, and chicken thighs are a little cheaper anyway. We're talking about soul food, and soul food is usually more affordable food, and it is very flavorful food. So chicken thighs is what we would use, although I suspect my mom probably would use drumsticks. So in my Dutch oven, I'm using a large Dutch oven. I've got some olive oil. I just added in some cumin seeds, some fennel seeds, and I'm adding in some black peppercorns. Since I'm going to strain out the broth, you can use the whole spices. There goes the fennel seeds. You can use the whole spices because you can strain them right out of the broth, and there's no need to grind your spices at this point. So when your oil is nice and hot and shimmering, by the way, you want to toast those spices only for a couple of seconds, really no more than maybe 10, 15. You don't want them to start to burn. Add in your thighs. I did cut my thighs into pieces just because super large chicken thighs isn't really what I was going for in this dish. So, you can go smaller, but quarter chicken thighs is kind of what I was looking for. And I'm just going to lightly brown the chicken in the olive oil. I did season it up with some salt and some, I was going to say black pepper. We've already added the black pepper. But just season it with some pink Himalayan salt. And when your chicken is nice and starting to get a little golden on the bottom, you can then flip the chicken. If your chicken is refusing to move, it needs a few more minutes. But you just want to make sure that you don't overdo this step because your chicken can turn a little stringy if you overdo it. Add in those veggies that we chopped. And in the little pot behind me, oh, by the way, the lemon slices. I'm sorry, I didn't show you this, but this is a whole lemon that I removed the zest. And that's all we need is the lemon part for this chicken. We're not going to use the juice, just the zest. And you will be surprised at the amount of flavor that comes out of that lemon. And you want to use the entire lemon zest. Now, I'm adding in some dried thyme. You can use fresh thyme, but I'm using dried thyme. And I'm also adding in some herbs de Provence. You can find that blend of herbs at the grocery store. And I'm adding in some crushed red pepper flakes for a little bit of spice. Give that a little bit of a toss. Now, in the pot behind my Dutch oven, I have some chicken broth that I'm warming. I like to add warm stock to warm food. You don't shock your meat by adding cold things into it. Now, as you can guess, this is a double stock that I'm making because I'm adding stock to a dish which will create a richer stock. So this will be like a super concentrated chicken broth. And I want it to be super concentrated because this chicken broth is going to do a double duty. It's going to help make the creamy liquid part for the chicken and also for the mashed potatoes. So I'm going to add the lid to the Dutch oven. Into the oven she goes. And this chicken baked for about 30 minutes at 350 degrees. Then you want to remove the lid. Give it a little bit of a stir and just make sure you've got enough liquid in there because, as I say, I need the stock off of this recipe. So if you need to top it up with just a little bit of water, you can do so, but don't overdo it. You don't want to dilute it. You want to make sure the stock stays nice and concentrated. So back into the oven she goes because it needs to, there we are. It needs to cook just a little bit more. You don't want the chicken to be half done. So I am removing all of the chicken and the vegetable pieces from the chicken stock. And you can see how delicious and golden that chicken broth is. Woo! Thank you, Jesus. It smells so good. That's the thing about soul food. Soul food, not to say that any other culture's food isn't flavorful, but soul food is known to be very flavorful. And another thing, it doesn't have to be nothing that's very heavy and super rich. So I'm removing some of the stock because, as I say, I need stock for my mashed potatoes. I do not use milk or butter in my mashed potatoes. I use rich stock. So I need to reserve some for my mashed potatoes, which is coming up in episode 2. Now I have some of my homemade butter and I'm just adding the butter because now we're stepping into the creamy bit. So with the remaining stock in the pot, I'm adding in a good fat knob of butter. Think about soul food that's so unique. It really is, you season with your heart. So use as much butter as you like. And I am using around 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Whisk that in. You really, really want to be quick so your flour doesn't lump. And then I'm going to add in about 1/4 cup of heavy cream. You don't need more than that. It doesn't need to be super rich. Of course, you want to taste it. I see I missed a peppercorn there. Make sure you remove those because they can be unpleasant to bite down on. And I'm going to add in some Dijon mustard. This is a really rich Dijon mustard. That is where we'll get our acid from because if we use the lemon juice, it could curdle the cream. So in order to get that nice acid balance, add in some mustard, Dijon mustard. And there goes in some crushed freshly ground black pepper. Freshly ground black pepper in any bechamel is important because that's what really gives it a nice flavor. Now I'm going to add the chicken back into the pot. You see how the onion pieces have really, really broken down and there's no need to remove them because they just soften right up into the pot. The lemon zest is still in with the chicken. If you wanted to, you could remove it. I don't. I mean, it continues to give flavor to the chicken. So give that a good stir. Make sure your chicken is nicely coated in that creamy lemony sauce. Put the lid back on the Dutch oven and into the oven she goes. And it bakes for just a few more minutes, about 15, 20 minutes, just to make sure all the flavors marry. And yummy, there it is out of the oven. Oh, it's so good. Now for butter peas. This is my mama style butter peas. This is how she made them. This is how I make them. So you take some water. And I'm adding in a stalk of celery. I'm adding in a red bell pepper and a green bell pepper. That's very important. If you don't add those 2 peppers, your butter peas will be very flat tasting. I learned this from my mom. I'm crushing some black peppercorns. That's another thing that's important. Freshly ground black pepper has a flavor that the pre-ground pepper just really doesn't have. So use the freshly ground black pepper for any beans or peas for that matter. You want to make sure that you crush it up really good. And I'm using my mortar and pestle, which this thing weighs about, if not 10 pounds, is right around it. But I'm also adding some dehydrated onion. It's not ground powdered onion powder. This is the dehydrated onion pieces. Now, you start off with a good amount of liquid because these peas need to simmer on a low simmer for about an hour. And once they simmer and they reduce down, they look somewhat like this. And you want to add some butter, which I did not film, but add yourself a good knob of butter, not too much, and let them continue simmering and they will get nice and creamy just like this. Of course, don't forget to add some salt. And be sure to stay tuned for part 2, where I will share with you my delicious mashed potatoes. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and the good Lord willing, I'll see you in part 2.